Hey everyone, welcome back to our magical garden. If you are a beginner gardener living outside India and trying to find information on how to start seeds for Indian ethnic vegetables in colder climates, you are at the right place. In today's video, we are going to look into the important steps of vegetable gardening. That is, which seeds we can start indoors and which seeds can be direct seeded. Before we get into the video, let's check what is the last frost date in my area. I live in zone 6B and let me quickly search what my last frost date is based on my zip code. Check this, my average last frost date is around April 29th as per this website. Use your own zip codes and note down your last frost date. This is the first thing that every gardener living in colder climates has to know. Now that we noted down our average last frost dates, let's get into the video. Let's start with the vegetables that we can start the seeds indoors. All the warm weather crops like tomatoes, peppers, brinjal and okra, all these vegetables take a very long time to go from seed to harvest. For the gardeners living in the cold weather and have a very short growing season, it is helpful to start the seeds indoors so that we can buy some additional harvest window before the cold weather kicks in and kills the plants. Most of the seed companies had clear instructions on the back of the seed packet about when to start the seeds. All these warm weather crops can be started 8 to 10 weeks before we plant them outdoors. I usually plant my warm weather vegetables in the ground 2 weeks after the last frost date. That is sometime after Mother's Day weekend. This week or next week is the perfect time for me to start all my tomatoes, peppers, brinjals and okras. You can adjust your start dates based on your last frost date. If you don't have enough indoor growing space, okra is optional. You should be able to grow okra pretty fast with the direct seeding once the weather gets warm enough. But tomato, pepper and brinjal, my suggestion is to start them indoors. Now let's look into the seeds that can be started indoors or outdoors based on your personal preference. Cabbage and cauliflower are cool weather crops and very slow growing vegetables. But one good thing about them is they can take light frost. So you can start these seeds indoors about 6 to 7 weeks before the last frost date and can be planted out in the ground even before your last frost date. I will be planting my 4-week-old cabbage and cauliflower seedlings out in the garden in the first week of April. Again, if you don't have enough indoor growing space, you can start these seeds directly in the ground as early as 3 weeks before your last frost date. That way, you will have enough time for these plants to grow before the hot summer time comes. Now moving on to cucumbers and gourds like bottle gourd, ridge gourd, bitter gourd and snake gourd, all these vining vegetables, we can try to start them indoors and transplant them out into the garden 2 weeks after the last frost date. But from my personal experience, I haven't seen much difference in the harvest times by starting these veggies indoors. I like to start these seeds directly in the ground after May 15th. To speed up the process, one thing we can do is pre-soak the seeds in water for a day or two and place them in wet paper towel and then place that paper towel in a warmer location. Keep checking the seed every day and make sure the towel is wet but not soggy all the time. You should start seeing the seeds getting sprouted in about 3 to 4 days and you can now plant these sprouts directly in the ground. But make sure the weather is consistently warm. Even nighttime temperatures are not going below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. You can try this paper towel method for starting seeds indoors too. I just tried this on okra and gongura plants last week and they have sprouted perfectly fine. See how beautifully they are opening up. Whether you are starting them indoors or outdoors, you can try this method on okra, sorrel or any other vegetable. Coming on to the greens. All the greens like to be sown directly in the ground. I'm not saying they can be started indoors. If you are someone who doesn't want to stop gardening during the cold winter months and wants to experiment with different crops, we can start most of the greens indoors. But I feel they grow healthier with direct seeding. And also if you are someone who just started gardening, it might get a little overwhelming to care for too many plants indoors. Cilantro and spinach are cool weather greens. We can direct seed them 3 to 4 weeks before the last frost date and harvest before the hot summer months. If we have space and time, we can start the seeds indoors 6 to 7 weeks before the last frost. Cilantro may take an additional week to germinate compared to spinach. And transplant them 3 weeks before the last frost date, just like cabbage and cauliflower. But these greens are very sensitive. They don't like their roots to be disturbed, so be careful not to disturb the roots while transplanting. I didn't really know that chukakura grows well in colder weather until last fall. I planted some chukakura seeds in the ground in September last year and was able to harvest them in October. The greens looked healthier when grown in colder weather compared to the hot summer months. But keep in mind, when I say colder weather for chukakura, it is early spring or early fall. It cannot take freezing temperatures like cilantro and spinach. I am planning to start chukakura seeds outdoors directly in the ground sometime around the last week of April this year. Malabar spinach is another great green that is easy to grow. As we can't grow the regular spinach during the peak summers, Malabar spinach comes in handy as it can take hot weather too. I used to direct seed these in the first week of May, but these plants are growing as volunteers in my garden for the last 2 years. So I stopped sowing the seeds. The new plants are growing from the previous year's seeds that fallen on the ground. My other favorite green is amaranth. Sometimes it is very hard to differentiate green amaranth from the common garden weeds. That is the reason you might want to dedicate a container to start your green amaranth. They are very tiny seeds and easily get displaced by the wind. That is the reason a lot of gardeners find amaranth growing everywhere in their garden. Amaranth seeds can be started right after your last frost date. I had green amaranth in my garden last year, so I know I will have many new volunteer plants coming up this spring. So I'm not going to start green amaranth, but just as an experiment, I just started red amaranth indoors this week. If this doesn't work out, I will direct seed them in spring. Fenugreek is another yummy and fast growing green that grows well in early spring. Start the seeds a week before your last frost date and you will be harvesting these greens within 3 weeks. You can also grow fenugreek as microgreen in an indoor setting under the grow light. Now let's look at the root vegetables. Carrots, beets, radish and potato, all these roots like direct seeding. As roots are the main part of these vegetables, they don't take the transplant that well. The roots may stop growing after the transplant, or even if they grow, they will be in all different shapes. They will lose their usual roundness or straightness. We can direct seed them outdoors 3 weeks before the last frost date. Radish is a very fast growing root. Radish might be a good option for beginner gardeners or parents trying to get kids into gardening. My kids just fell in love with these colorful radish last year. I might have missed some of your favorite vegetables here, so don't hesitate to comment if you have any questions. I will try my best to do my research and get back to you. One last thing before we end this video. As you know, weather is getting so unpredictable these days. So when you are starting to start your seeds or moving your plants outdoors, don't just go by the last frost date as hard rule. Check the weather in your area for the next 2 weeks before doing anything out in the garden. Hope this information will come in handy for at least some of you. I'll see you in another video. Until then, happy gardening!